There are places on the map that mark the path, but never reveal the secrets within. Join Terra Uncharted as we open the door to hidden mysteries, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next thrilling journey. The discovery of the drifting clipper. The Atlantic has always been a graveyard of ships. Storms, wars, and human folly have swallowed countless vessels, leaving behind only rumors and wreckage. But every once in a while, the ocean offers back something stranger, something that defies reason. It was the summer of 1887 when a group of Breton fishermen spotted what they first thought was a derelict ship on the horizon. From afar, its silhouette looked jagged and broken, sails torn into ragged banners, flapping lifelessly in the wind. The fishermen expected it to be no more than another carcass of the sea, drifting aimlessly, waiting to sink beneath the waves. But as their small vessel drew closer, they realized something was off. The clipper wasn't drifting. It was steering. The bow cut steadily through the rolling swells, moving as though guided by an invisible hand. The fishermen whispered among themselves. No one was on deck. No voices shouted commands. And yet the wheel at the helm turned with deliberate movements, as if an unseen captain stood there, correcting the ship's course. Against their better judgment, the fishermen boarded. The ship was an iron clipper, built in the early 19th century, the kind of vessel meant for speed and long voyages. Despite the battered sails and weather-worn hull, the vessel was intact. Too intact. What they found inside froze them to the bone. In the galley, the hearth still smoldered. Blackened pots sat above glowing embers, as though a meal had been abandoned only minutes before. In the captain's quarters, a logbook lay open on the desk. The last entry, written in a firm hand, cut off mid-sentence. And should the storm not break, I fear. The ink trailed into nothing, the pen left resting against the page as if the writer had been interrupted in the middle of his thought. But the most unnerving detail was not the unfinished log, nor the eerie silence of the ship. It was the atmosphere. Fishermen swore that as soon as they stepped aboard, the air grew heavier, thick with a metallic tang, like blood on iron. They claimed they felt eyes watching them from the empty corridors, the hairs on their neck rising with each creak of the timbers. One man reported hearing footsteps overhead, steady and deliberate, though no one was there. Another swore he saw the shadow of a tall figure pass by the wheel, standing firm as the ship carved its course. When they finally lowered themselves back into their own vessel, they didn't look back. But the sea wasn't done with the iron clipper. Weeks later, another crew sighted it off the coast of Portugal, then again near the Azores. Reports began to spread of a ghostly clipper, sails torn but unyielding, helm manned by an unseen captain. Some claimed it vanished into mist when approached. Others said it reappeared weeks later in waters hundreds of miles away, moving with unnatural speed. The fishermen who had first boarded it never forgot. They spoke of it only in whispers, warning others not to get too close. One by one, each man died within the decade. Accidents at sea, sudden illness, freak storms. Among superstitious sailors, whispers grew louder. The iron clipper was cursed. Whoever touched its decks had sealed their fate. And yet, one question lingered. Where had the crew gone? There were no signs of struggle, no bodies, no blood. It was as if every sailor had simply walked off the ship, leaving behind their meals, their logbooks, their very lives, vanishing into the endless Atlantic night. The ocean had many mysteries, but this ship, this silent iron phantom, was different. It felt alive. And somewhere in the silence of the helm, many swore they could hear it. The faint sound of boots on wood, a captain still pacing his command, steering his ship toward eternity. The iron clipper had found its legend, but the world had only just begun to hear the whispers of the silent captain. Whispers of the curse. When the story of the drifting iron clipper began to spread, sailors across the Atlantic reacted with equal measures of fascination and dread. The sea has always carried tales of phantom ships, from the Flying Dutchman to the Mary Celeste. But this was different. This wasn't just a vessel found abandoned once and later claimed by storms. The Iron Clipper was still out there, sailing, appearing, and reappearing, like it had never truly left the world of the living. By the autumn of 1887, whispers had transformed into warnings. Sailors swapping stories in smoky taverns from Lisbon to Liverpool spoke of the silent captain, a figure said to still command the ship. They described him as tall and stern, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. He never spoke, never gave orders aloud, but his crew, if such a crew still existed, obeyed him in silence. Some claimed to see shadows moving across the deck at night, pale shapes drifting where sailors once stood, keeping watch without voices or faces. The fishermen who had first boarded the vessel refused to speak to journalists, but their families admitted the men were never the same. They would wake screaming from nightmares of footsteps echoing down empty halls, or of cold hands reaching out from the ship as iron hull to drag them into the deep. 3 of them died in sudden, violent accidents at sea. One man drowned when his fishing boat capsized in calm waters. Another was found crushed beneath fallen rigging that no one remembered loosening. The last vanished without trace. His skiff discovered floating empty, the oars neatly placed across the seats as though he had stepped off into the ocean itself. It didn't take long before rumors of a curse spread like wildfire. "Touch the silent captain's ship," sailors warned, "and he'll come for you." But the sea is not only home to superstition, it is also the hunting ground for treasure. By the 19th century, tales of lost gold and Spanish plunder still tempted fortune seekers. Word soon circulated that the Iron Clipper had been carrying something valuable. Some said silver, others claimed smuggled jewels from the Caribbean. A few whispered of gold, stolen from Spanish galleons centuries before. Treasure hunters began to take interest, and when greed stirs, fear is never enough to hold men back. One such man was Captain Elias Marrow, a salvage operator known for his reckless streak. In 1890, he declared in a London tavern that he would find the Iron Clipper and claim whatever treasure it carried. "Ghost stories don't fill coffers," he sneered, "but a cargo hold full of Spanish gold does." For weeks, Marrow's crew searched the Atlantic. They followed scattered reports, sightings near the Canary Islands, a shadowed silhouette glimpsed by whalers off the Azores. And then, one night, under a swollen moon, they found it. The Iron Clipper loomed out of the fog, just as described, tattered sails, weathered hull, and yet gliding smoothly against the tide. Marrow ordered his men aboard. What they found matched the fishermen's accounts: smoldering embers in the galley, an unfinished captain's log, and an oppressive silence that weighed down on them like chains. But they also found something else. Locked in a rusted chest within the cargo hold were stacks of silver ingots, tarnished but unmistakably real. The men cheered. They had proven the legends wrong. The ship was no ghost, only a derelict carrying riches. They hauled several ingots back to their salvage vessel, eager to return to port and claim their prize. They never made it. 3 days into their voyage home, the crew of Marrow's ship began to fall ill. One by one, they developed fevers, delirium, and violent seizures. By the time a passing steamer found them drifting aimlessly, nearly half the men were dead. The survivors spoke in hushed, broken voices about a figure that walked their deck at night, a man in a long coat, his face hidden, who stared silently at them until they fled below. The silver ingots were still aboard, but no merchant would buy them. Every attempt to sell the treasure ended with sudden misfortune. Buyers drowned, warehouses caught fire, ships carrying the silver sank without explanation. The ingots vanished into private collections, cursed objects traded like contraband, and the legend of the silent captain grew darker. Sailors began to say the Iron Clipper was no ordinary ghost ship. It was a lure. a trap cast out into the sea to draw in the greedy and the curious. Anyone who boarded it, anyone who even dared take what belonged to it, was marked. The silent captain would follow them, patient and merciless, until their lives ended in terror. The ship itself continued to appear. Merchant vessels crossing the Atlantic reported glimpsing it on stormy nights, pacing them silently before fading into mist. Some captains claimed it even attempted to ram their ships, forcing them to change course. Others swore it lingered just beyond the horizon, always watching, never chasing, like a predator toying with its prey. By the early 1900s, the iron clipper had become a sailor's omen. Spotting it on the horizon meant disaster. Entire crews refused to sail if they believed the silent captain had crossed their path. Naval authorities dismissed the tales as superstition, but could not deny the strange string of disappearances and shipwrecks clustered around the regions where the phantom clipper was most often seen. The most chilling report came in 1903, from the steamship Aurora. Its crew claimed they saw the iron clipper drifting alongside them at twilight. Though no signal was given, a single lantern burned in the captain's quarters. Through the glass, they swore they saw a tall figure standing at the window, watching them. The Aurora reached port safely, but the captain who filed the report was found dead in his cabin 3 days later, slumped over his desk, the logbook open. His last words scrawled across the page, "He has found me." By then, the legend had fully taken hold. The silent captain was no longer just a ghost story. It was a curse, an inevitability for those unlucky enough to cross its path. Scholars debated its origins. Was it a remnant of the Bermuda Triangle's many mysteries? A ship caught between worlds? Or simply a tale that had grown too large, fueled by fear and coincidence? But for those who had seen it with their own eyes, for the sailors who had heard the phantom footsteps, felt the oppressive weight of its silence, and watched their comrades die in strange and violent ways, there was no question. The silent captain was real, and he was still out there, steering his iron vessel through the endless Atlantic, waiting for the next soul bold or foolish enough to board his cursed ship. The curse spreads. By the dawn of the 20th century, the iron clipper was no longer just a whisper in taverns or the nervous mutterings of fishermen. Its story had begun to seep into newspapers, maritime journals, and even the archives of naval institutions. The age of exploration was giving way to the age of modern science, but even science struggled to explain a ship that appeared and vanished, a vessel that left only tragedy in its wake. In 1911, a lengthy article appeared in the Atlantic Chronicle, written by a maritime historian named Dr. Alastair Grayson. The piece was intended to dismiss the legends, to categorize the iron clipper as nothing more than seafaring folklore. Yet halfway through his research, Grayson's skepticism wavered. He uncovered dozens of naval reports spanning decades, strikingly similar accounts from crews of different nations describing the same details. A tall, silent figure on deck, the unnatural smoothness of the ship's movements, the eerie glow of lanterns that should have long since burned out. Grayson wrote reluctantly, "If this is a tale, then it is one told too consistently, across too many oceans, by men who never met." The iron clipper is either the greatest maritime hoax of our age, or it is something else entirely, something that haunts the sea itself. That article marked the beginning of wider fascination. Paranormal societies, then burgeoning in Europe and America, seized on the story. Spiritualists claimed the ship was trapped between worlds, its captain bound by unfinished business. Others argued it was an echo of the past, some kind of spectral playback imprinted on the ocean, doomed to replay its voyage until time itself eroded the memory. But for sailors, fascination turned to fear. Ports along the Atlantic reported an increase in desertions. Men refused to sail when rumors spread that the iron clipper had been sighted nearby. Insurance companies quietly raised premiums for routes passing through the Bermuda region. Even the British Admiralty, while publicly dismissing the legend, kept unofficial files on phantom ship activity. and then the curse began to spread beyond those who had merely seen the vessel. In 1914, the Norwegian cargo ship Freya docked in Bergen with a bizarre story. Its crew claimed to have intercepted a drifting lifeboat in mid-Atlantic. Inside were two dead men, their faces contorted in terror, hands frozen as though shielding themselves from an unseen attacker. The lifeboat bore the name of Captain Elias Marrow, S. salvage ship, the one that had famously plundered the iron clipper S. cargo decades earlier. But Marrow's vessel had been declared lost long ago. How had its lifeboat reappeared, thousands of miles away, with corpses seemingly untouched by time? The discovery reignited old fears. Scholars debated the possibility of preserved bodies, lifeboats carried by hidden currents. But among sailors there was no debate. The curse was still active. The silent captain was still claiming those who dared defy him. As the decades rolled on, the sightings continued. In 1922, an American destroyer reported shadowing an unknown ship during exercises off the Azores. The silhouette matched the iron clipper. Attempts to signal it went unanswered. Radar, still primitive at the time, showed nothing. The destroyer's captain logged the event but marked it unexplained anomaly. Within a year, he was dead, heart failure, though his peers recalled him as a man in perfect health. In 1937, a French expedition searching for sunken treasure near the Canaries vanished without a trace. Their last radio message was chillingly brief. "We see him." By then, the story of the silent captain had transcended folklore and begun to infect culture itself. Writers and playwrights referenced the iron clipper as a symbol of doom. Superstitious seamen sketched crude drawings of a faceless captain in their logbooks, convinced that acknowledging him kept the curse at bay. A maritime museum in Lisbon displayed what it claimed was one of the cursed silver ingots, though visitors swore the air grew colder near the case and staff refused to remain in the exhibit alone after dark. But perhaps the most disturbing element was the way the curse seemed to follow bloodlines. Descendants of those original fishermen who had boarded the ship in the 1880s reported misfortune across generations. One family lost 3 sons to drowning, all in separate incidents. Another endured a string of freak accidents. Fires, unexplained machinery failures, sudden illnesses. Though skeptics dismissed these as coincidences, the families themselves whispered otherwise. They believed the silent captain had marked them permanently, that the curse passed down like a dark inheritance. Even in the Second World War, stories persisted. Convoy escorts claimed to glimpse an old clipper shadowing them in fog, though no ship of that class had sailed in decades. In one chilling account, a U-boat commander, SS Log, recovered after his vessel was sunk, described an encounter in the mid-Atlantic. Strange ship, no flag, approached silently. I thought it was British, but when we manned the deck guns, it vanished. Only the sound of footsteps on steel remained, as if walking across our own hull. Hours later, depth charges ended the U-boat's mission. By the 1950s, the iron clipper was no longer dismissed as mere legend. It had become a symbol of the ocean's unexplainable power, an enduring reminder that science had not conquered the sea. Universities quietly funded research into the phenomenon, disguising it as maritime atmospheric anomalies. Paranormal investigators, armed with tape recorders and primitive sonar, set out to capture proof. Some claimed success, producing distorted audio tapes filled with rhythmic creaks and the unmistakable sound of a man's boots pacing across metal decking. And yet, the silent captain remained elusive. The ship appeared, terrified its witnesses, and slipped back into the mist. Always near, never reachable, always watching. One chilling pattern emerged across all reports: silence. Those who encountered the iron clipper often described not only the absence of human voices, but the deadening of the sea itself. No gulls, no waves, no wind. As if the very world paused when the ship arrived, holding its breath in deference to the captain who commanded it. The effect on human psychology was profound. Survivors often struggled with insomnia, paranoia, and hallucinations. Some claimed to see the captain's shadow even on land, reflected in mirrors or passing across windows at night. Others reported hearing faint footsteps in empty rooms, the clink of chains dragging across wooden floors. It was as though the curse no longer belonged to the ship alone. It was bleeding into the lives of all who dared to acknowledge it. By the close of the 20th century, the Iron Clipper had transcended its origins. No longer merely a drifting ghost ship, it had become an enduring enigma, woven into the collective dread of the sea. The silent captain's legend was alive, spreading across generations, infecting not just sailors and treasure hunters, but ordinary people drawn to its mystery. And through it all, the same unanswered question remained. Who was the silent captain? What bound him to his iron ship? And how far did his curse truly reach? Legacy of Fear. For most legends of the sea, time has a way of softening their edges. Myths blur, stories fade, and the ocean swallows their memory. But the Iron Clipper, the so-called Ship of Silence, has resisted the erosion of time. In fact, its shadow seems to grow darker with every decade. The first modern sightings. In 1967, the Portuguese Navy conducted exercises near the Azores. Radar recorded an unidentified vessel moving at impossible speeds, cutting across the fleet's formation. When patrol planes were sent to investigate, their pilots reported nothing but thick, rolling fog. The recordings of their radio chatter still exist, filled with tension, disbelief, and then silence, as one plane dropped off communications entirely. The wreckage was never recovered. That was the first file officially marked Phantom Clipper. It would not be the last. Over the next 50 years, accounts from sailors, fishermen, and even research vessels painted an eerie pattern. The Iron Clipper appears most often during calm seas, when winds vanish and sound dies. Witnesses describe the same thing. A massive 19th-century clipper with tattered sails, gliding without resistance, its wheel turning as if guided by an invisible hand. And, always, at its helm, the figure of a captain, tall, unmoving, face obscured by shadow. Encounters that shouldn't exist. The most chilling part isn't just the sightings, it's the impossible details that connect them. In 1999, a cargo ship en route from Dakar to Lisbon reported an unmarked vessel crossing its bow. The crew described a man standing at the wheel, coat fluttering through no wind blew. Later, when investigators interviewed them, every single sailor, without prior consultation, drew the same sketch of the man's silhouette. 2 years later, a yacht off Nova Scotia picked up a floating crate. Inside, a rusted sextant wrapped in oil-stained cloth. Etched into the metal were initials belonging to the last known captain of the Iron Clipper, a man officially declared dead in 1872. Carbon testing suggested the artifact had not spent a century underwater. The cursed journal. And then there is the journal. And then, in 2014, divers exploring wreckage off the Canary Islands recovered a waterlogged captain's log. Its pages crumbled at a touch, but one passage was still legible. The handwriting matched that of the Iron Clipper's last recorded captain. The final line, "The sea has chosen me. I will not let her go, nor she me." The log was sent to a university for preservation. Weeks later, the building's archives were consumed by fire. The log was lost, though staff swore they had heard the sound of footsteps echoing in empty halls before the flames began. The silent transmission. In 2020, a storm in the North Atlantic forced a Canadian Coast Guard cutter to take shelter near Greenland. During the storm, their radio equipment picked up an unexpected transmission. Morse code, faint but clear. It spelled out a single phrase, repeated endlessly. Steer starboard, steer starboard, steer starboard. The signal S source was triangulated to a patch of open sea, directly above the last known coordinates of the Iron Clipper. A pattern of death. It isn't only objects and messages that surface. There are lives, too, snuffed out without explanation. Treasure hunters who claim to find fragments of the Iron Clipper vanish at sea. A journalist investigating the story in 1982 drowned in his own bathtub. A researcher in 2017, after publishing a paper linking the Clipper to ancient seafaring cults, drove off a pier at low tide. Each case is ruled an accident. Each feels like something else. Sailors whisper that the captain does not tolerate curiosity, that he chooses his witnesses carefully, that to see him is to be marked. Theories that fail to explain. Scientists attempt explanations. Methane gas eruptions causing hallucinations. Magnetic anomalies scrambling equipment. Collective psychology among sailors repeating the same myth. But these theories falter against the consistency of detail, the uniform description of the captain, the recurrence of artifacts, the precision of modern radar records. Some folklorists suggest the Iron Clipper is not a ghost ship at all, but a living entity, the ocean itself manifesting as a vessel. Others whisper of a deal struck between a captain and the sea, a bargain granting eternal passage at the cost of his crew. But perhaps the most unsettling theory comes from maritime occultists, that the silent captain is building a fleet, that every lost sailor, every vanished researcher, every drowned fisherman, each one takes their place among his crew, doomed to follow him forever across a horizon no living man can reach. The final, unanswered question. The Iron Clipper has never been captured on film. Photographs blur, video feeds distort, electronic sensors fail. It remains untouchable, unproven, and yet undeniable. One thing is certain: the sightings continue. As recently as 2022, a Norwegian tanker reported a vessel gliding silently across their bow in fog. The captain of the tanker swore that as the ship passed, he heard a voice whisper through the steel of his hull, "You should not have seen me." He has not spoken publicly since, and so the question remains: is the silent captain a relic of the past, cursed to sail for eternity? Or is he something more, something beyond human understanding, an echo of the ocean's will, wearing the skin of a ship? Perhaps the real curse is this: the more you learn of him, the closer he draws to you. The sea keeps its silence. The captain keeps his watch. And maybe as you listen now, he knows your name. What do you believe? Is the Iron Clipper just a tale, or a ghost ship still prowling the Atlantic under the command of its silent captain? If you want more chilling secrets of the ocean, like, share, and subscribe to join our crew on Terra Uncharted. And tell us in the comments, would you dare sail into the fog, knowing he might be waiting?